Very good. Yeah. Looking forward to this.
Very good. So, welcome to our member conference call on paving the way for a high employee trajectory. It always makes me a little bit nervous when the cover slide has some other text on it, but I think, okay, better onboarding. It's similar but different. A big pleasure to invite Tim, who's kindly agreed to stay up very late to join us from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Tim is known by some of you as he's one of our alumni. Very good to have you with us, Tim. I know you've been busy hiring and have learned a lot in that process. So thank you for sharing with us. Let me just hand it over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Janus. Good to see some old friends here as well as new friends. Let's connect more after this. So I'll take you on a 20-minute journey, what Janus called better onboarding. I added that subtitle, which is and why trajectories matter. So before we start, right, let me just take you on a very short anecdote on on this. While SoCar doesn't offer like plane sharing yet, we do car sharing. Imagine the following, right? You take a plane from Los Angeles to JFK Airport in New York City, and looking at the map from a 2D top-down view, you will notice that given that New York City lies like a bit further north relative to Los Angeles, the trajectory slopes slightly upwards, right? So then imagine that the pilot, upon departure, sets the course towards New York City, yet trims the plane just a slightly few degrees towards further east. After 5 hours, you see the capital and land in Washington, D.C. So credits for James Clear, who's the author of Atomic Habits, for this like short anecdote. But it will actually serve as the fundament for today's session, which is trajectories. And in our context, a employee's trajectory from becoming like a fully proficient, high-performing employee while starting as a new joiner, right? So today it's about why trajectories matter, how we can impact them with targeted intervention, and also how costly they can become if we're not correcting them early. And you're not slipping the geography lesson yet in a bit, right? But I'm dialing in, as Janu said, from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, which is it's 10 o'clock here now in the evening. I've lived here for a good 3.5 years, where I'm part of a car sharing company called SoCar, where I scale our talent and car sharing mobility service across our verticals across Southeast Asia. And to take it in advance, can Vikings survive the heat? Yes, they can. So while it's very rewarding to actually live here in Malaysia, working with SoCar, life in general is very good here. So for those that are interested to do a stint here, come visit or whatnot, please connect with me. We can catch up separately over virtual coffee or beer. Right, but how do I fit into this SoFam, which is our SoCa family? This is a picture pre-pandemic. We all wear still masks when we go out and meet each other. Um, I, aside from being the lead singer for our company band So Famous, lead the talent management function. So I started as an associate of the first 60 here. Now region-wide, we're 350 employees. Part of the company's growth throughout our Series A and Series B during our multi-region and country expansion in Southeast Asia. So at the beginning of my time at SoCar, I was very much focused on talent acquisition and onboarding of talent, which is basically the hiring start to an employee's day one. But this year, and also for the better last year, my focus really much expanded to talent management, which addresses a fuller range of the employee's lifecycle. So I got a team of 6. I work in the people and transformation department, which in other companies might be called HR. But you'll get to know throughout this call while we kind of rebranded ourselves in terms of how we position people and its transformation throughout this company. Janos already introduced it. My roots lie somewhat in Denmark, but I actually grew up in Germany, so I'm a Südslesviger, after which I moved even further north to study in Aarhus in Denmark, where I worked with Janos for the better 2.5 years. And he's actually the one bringing me into seeing like this power of teams and building networks, and not the least knowledge sharing. So then you might wonder, how did I end up in Malaysia? Admittedly, I stumbled upon a Star Wars ad with stormtroopers with just a job posting, and I clicked on the banner, and then the journey somewhat started. Joined a startup called Umai, and then eventually joining here full-time in SoCar. So what we do, I shared, right? We do car sharing, but we actually spread this out on 4 different verticals from now in our last 4 years, where we have outperformed our local competitors, right? Even though it's very new to the region, and integrating ourselves as an adding brick into the mobility space here. SoCa originally is from Korea. who now actually go IPO this year. Now with a joint venture between SoCar Korea and SK Holdings, we set up our entity, right? 4 years in operations, started in Kuala Lumpur, scaled out through cities here in Malaysia and also through Indonesia, even throughout the pandemic. So SoCar, who's our core business, at least in the initial stage, is a B2C vertical. So since 2018, we have a company-owned fleet that can be booked by the hour with a mobile application, right? You have a remote key on a mobile app with 2,000 cars in 1,000 locations now here in Malaysia. So if you know Car2Go or Drive Now, Zipcar, wherever you live on this earth, this concept might be familiar with you. Eventually, we discovered that people own a lot of cars here in Malaysia. So we added travel, which is our people-to-people vertical. And it's kind of that network Airbnb for cars, right? A car host renter ecosystem that basically allows cars to be rented out with each other. And then we also added Dash, which is kind of this intermediate because we have a lot of operational tasks of moving cars around, delivery, relocation, personal driver. So we have basically an app that allows independent freelancers to take jobs from us. And finally, we have Boss, which is a B2B car leasing company that caters to corporate clients, right? So basically that explains a bit to you about our ecosystem and also fairly a bit the complex landscape of how we build our organization, which will further pave the way for our problem statement in a bit. But just a bit of the fine print, as I said, right? Janos called this better onboarding, and better always implies like this a relative comparison to something else. But I will put a disclaimer on this because onboarding, I actually learned here, is very dependent on the context, right? It's different on the company, its size, the people that you hire. It needs to be highly hyper localized towards the stage of the business that you're in, right? So I'll not talk so much about best practices today, and I'll not intend to claim those on behalf of you. What you'll hear today is our optimized way of onboarding, right? And how we do it today. If we speak a half year down the road, a year down the road, probably we will have to adjust it further, right? So my objective today for you is that you actually take a little away from the little components and tweaks that you can consider adding to your strategy. But please, I mean, of course, I look forward to the discussion at the end where you share with me, maybe share with me about more what you have in mind about it, right? But I think we have one thing in common, which is our objective of employee assimilation, which is how do we close this time, money, sensitive gap for new employees from being this new joiner to becoming a fully assimilated, high-performing employee. And admittedly, in the initial stage, very intimate team, we were very good at it. Yet over time, growing SoCar, it became increasingly evident that this notion of this like smaller team with less complex structures was fading. So we experienced that turnover increased, and those that even remained in the company, their morale was infected by, for example, interim increased workload, while the replacement is to be found, right? So we measured it. We looked into the employee feedback that showed like kind of a loss of collective push and belonging when we added new verticals, right? We spread ourselves very thin geographically. And aside from the pandemic, that also forced us, of course, like every one of us, I would assume, to work from home for the better 1.5 years. So both who were with us before the pandemic and those who joined us after that or during it were like unable to feel the organization. So, and while employee departure is kind of a natural path in an employee's life cycle, we observed that certain patterns in employees' feedback caused inhibitors that basically prevented them from staying beyond the 6-month probation or the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year probation or tenure mark, right? So what we learned from exit interviews and employee surveys is that there's kind of a lack of an understanding of the vision and mission as a company and the potential of our mobility product and the pain points with our service. And then at the same time, there's an unclear and realistic objectives and KPIs, right? Key performance indicators in the probation period and beyond, which also caused late confirmations of the probation or even extension of confirmation due to low probation performance. And not the least, I mean, people look beyond the 6-month mark, of course. What comes next, right? What is my career development here, and so on. So we try to understand the patterns of this. We try to find the root cause. Is it the unclear communication of vision and mission by management? Are managers not trained? Are they too overloaded to lead that talent? Is it even the wrong talent that we bring on board? Or is there actually a different antecedent to why employees' trajectory differs from expectation to reality? So remember this figure, right? We started out with actually flying to New York and eventually landed in Washington, D.C. Not to say that this is a downgrade at all. Yet when we transform this to our to our employee life cycle, we see that basically the gap of expectation and reality further basically goes apart along the way, right? Oversimplified figure, but I'll use this for the time of our session today. And while we have historically been good at basically being highly competitive in our vision on talent, as well as the actual hiring process, including the candidate's experience, we actually found out that we should start way earlier than that, right? By building good habits that start from how we address our talent in the first place as a company, and how that then enables us to, in our organizational and job design, towards our hiring process, towards the onboarding, to the probation and beyond. So in other words, it's kind of an interrelated process flow that intends to have favorable ripple effects further down the road of an employee's journey with us, right? So we discovered, and you could see this in the figure, that the more we move down the employee life cycle, which is time, right, the further, of course, we are, and the harder the correction becomes, right? So how do we basically move from always this reactive approach from, okay, we need to close that gap, towards actually preventing the gap from happening in the first place? So the key statement actually becomes, how do we keep up this good momentum to set that trajectory over time, right? Again, very oversimplified, yet the yellow line actually stipulates like these sometimes you probably know this in your organization, that you do certain initiatives and then they die out very quickly, and eventually the gap is still there even though you did better than before, right? So how do we basically start out right from the start? So today we'll talk about 6 interventions, right, that are all manifested here in these bubbles, which have 2 key objectives at all times. Assimilation, right, which is basically the assimilation into the organization's mission, vision, the people, the culture, the role, the job, tools and systems, while at the same time being engaging, right? I mean, people are there to be proud of what they do, be proud of being part of a company, and foster the sense of belonging. So to give you the conclusion in advance, to also basically help you to follow better throughout the remaining 6 points, is the following. What moved the needle? 1, create brand ambassadors from the start, right? So these promoters who eventually are promoting the brand to new people, to convert them to be promoters as well, is very important even before and during the employment, right? The second is empowerment and accountability. You might even have the tendency yourself, if you're not working in HR or people in transformation, oh yeah, HR will solve it for you, right? When an employee doesn't perform, who to ask? Oh, HR will solve it, right? But we basically twisted that around, right? So basically empowerment and accountability to head of departments and performance managers, while at the same time, 3, give this structured and guiding onboarding program prior to day 1, but also beyond the day 1, right? Let's start with the talent vision. I think very much of us, probably most of us, will claim that talent is very much in the center of our organization, right? That eventually also naturally where capital efficiency comes in, particularly investors are naturally curious about that, but also technology in terms of automation, making things more efficient, making yourself even redundant, right? So we looked into these 3 components. And we have three parts in terms of our vision towards talent, which 1 is own the experience, 2 is data access, and 3 is scalability. So own the experience in terms of our vision to our talent means employees' growth is starting with empowerment and with a mindset of customer obsession and data-driven decision-making, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to facilitate this culture of experimentation and recognize performance by also showing immediate impact, right? So basically something that confirms or discourages certain behavior. And how do we do that? By giving data, like by default, to everyone that comes into the organization. Everyone can access our database, run experiments to basically see this today's world of instant gratification, right? We go on Instagram, we go on TikTok, we want to see this immediate impact of our actions, right? Similar to the workplace, how do we basically allow people to be empowered to take their own decisions? And not the least, a vision for scaling, right? I think this is something our CEO always basically puts forward. Is like, what processes and output can you produce that will even sustain when the business goes 10x? So when are you stopping to producing for today and tomorrow, but for actually something that can withhold the very closer future, right? And not the least, and this always sounds a bit counterintuitive, but how do you make yourself redundant in your role as fast as possible by automating matters, right? Or by scaling processes? Because at the end of the day, when it also comes to us as employees, we want to grow, right? Whether it's promotion, other tasks, and so on, to basically make the redundant matters automated is something that is very much in the center. So by optimizing this mindset and the goals of this talent strategy towards this conscious output per dollar spent, because that's eventually also what investors look at, we found that we set a good initial trajectory. So then in terms of the organizational and job design, it's actually all about how we are better prepared when we hire, so what we look for, and onboard when we assimilate. So because before this, and this of course sounds a bit like maybe self-explanatory, yet we actually did this after the hire was happening. Who am I actually looking for? Sometimes we were surprised that this was first learned when we're designing the KPIs after we closed the role. What does he or she need to bring to the table? Fairly like similar, but actually we were just given a JD and go ahead and hire, right? And most importantly, it's not HR who will be accountable for the hire. Talent acquisition will never be able to take a decision on who you hire, but hiring managers and performance managers in the end will do it themselves. So this entire process actually starts with designing the job from day one, right? What are the KPIs? What are the objectives? And what gaps do I actually want to fill when it comes to hiring that new role? Right, so we developed a framework, a competency and skills matrix, which is inspired by Toyota's culture. Be very welcome to look into that or ask for reference. I can share that. Which basically split into standardized company excellence variables and technical excellence for a role, which basically stipulates what gap does my team currently have, what can be trained, but what should I actually hire for to basically fill certain gaps from occurring in my performance output. But this also has a different intention. It also means that the hiring manager, which later comes to the performance manager, has a much better expectation setting towards what he or she wants to hire for, but also in terms of the transmission throughout the hiring process, plus the onboarding itself, right? So when it then comes to the hiring process itself, then we already set up with everything that we wanted, right? We understand the job well, we understand what this person should do. So we are basically automatically moving this notion of being recruiters or recruiting people to acquiring talent, right? By being proactive, by strategically planning, by when do we need which talent in the organization, and not the least, stopping this facility or assembly line approach of basically, okay, here's your JD, please hire, here you go, but moving towards a more candidate experience approach, right? Because then we remove the paradigm of what's in it for me, which I often hear when candidates come to us, oh, this is a conversation today, I can ask questions, because it's not us who only takes a decision when we hire someone, but it's actually also the counterpart, right? So eventually there's two people that take a decision, or two stakeholders. One is us as an organization, but most importantly, also the candidate, particularly in a very competitive talent market like Malaysia and Indonesia, where there's a lot of great startups out there, right? Where they're basically the war for talent, that's I think a terminology used in the industry sometimes, is real. But at the same time, when we push and pull, we basically want to create realistic expectations, because actually we notice that people don't really want to be sold off all the time. They don't want to hear what's great, but they want to actually know what's their purpose, what do they want to solve, and what's expected of them, right? If you want to have these individuals that really want to drive the vision forward, that's what we basically look for. The second thing that we noticed, in particularly when you were a startup, is how can we close this gap that people don't understand our service? What do we stand in for, right? And also basically what lies ahead of us. So basically creating more content that people can self-assess to educate themselves about our service in the candidacy is very important when it comes to also taking the decision to apply for a position, right? Not the least, and I talked about this before, basically making them these brand ambassadors. So incepting this vision of car sharing and this mission of reducing car ownership into them from the candidacy at the start. So what we, for example, do is giving them free promotions, right, to try out our service, to better understand what potential does this service hold, but also what basically gaps are there still in the service that he or she will solve. Eventually, if we sign the offer, actually, I mean, there's still always these bridge activities that we can do, right? We can take them out for casual dinner, we can take them out for lunch, we can have them meet the team in this 2-3 months of the period. I know that this slide goes a bit fast, there's a lot of text, but what is important about this is always what my CEO says is keep them warm, right? Warm them up, keep them warm, throughout the period of time, because we don't want to lose them after the signature towards the day one. So while we can take them out for lunch to have that, what we actually found way more effective in terms of creating this trajectory towards day one is removing all administrative matters. I mean, ask yourself, when were things asked such as, what's your bank account, medical insurance, where do you live, and all these things, were these done on the day one, or even after that during the first week? Or can we actually do this in advance of the time? Right, so we have removed any administrative matters from day one or even beyond that. Everything that we need in terms of employing someone, we already have way beyond basically the person even walks into the door on day one, right? How do we do that? With our HRMS system, which is basically our HR tool, which basically gives even at the same time a clear schedule and a plan for the first week, what they can expect when they come. So when you see our structured first day experience, or the first day experience, if you remove the structured, actually there's only two things that are outside of these two circles that remain. One is we need to provide them the laptop and the tools, which is the assets, which we can't really give them in advance. During the pandemic, we shipped them, of course, throughout the city because people work from home. And the second thing is learning the facilities. But anything else on day one is actually about the experience, right? Which is engagement and excitement, as well as number two, assimilation into the organization. So what do? One is part of our service, actually, we have Soka Plus, which is a private chauffeur. And we basically book that for every new joiner to pick them up from home to bring them to our office, right? It's a very small matter, but it actually removes the stress and hassle to one, not finding the office, because KL can be very confusing in terms of its road structure sometimes. There's traffic, so you won't be late. So you basically already come comfortably into the door. We revised our entire onboarding deck to assimilate them better into our business in terms of our vision, our culture, our mission. How do we look like and what's in it for you, right, to stay here? And after that, in the afternoon, once we basically are done with the assimilation of the employees from the people and transformation side, they meet the manager. And if you recall from step two, she or he is already prepared, right? The KPIs are clear, the expectations are clear. So basically we can start from day one with, here, this is your job, this is your purpose. Previously, small anecdote, it was usually like, oh, I have a new joiner today. Wait for me, I come into the office in 10 minutes, right? Because people actually were not even aware that they have new joiner. So now we basically changed that. And lastly, we have a buddy who basically intends to remove this administrative burden from people and transformation to share more about the more like, this, how do we do certain things around here, right? Even more assimilation into the culture. So we remove people and transformation as the only face that people know to already creating networks within the company, right? By having a buddy in that sense. And the last stage is the probation period, at least for today, which is admittedly the most interesting period of time, but also from people and transformation standpoint, because there we lose visibility, right? So far, we always have been in terms of control because we are following the process. We're even part of the process mostly when it comes to hiring and onboarding someone. But now it's about actually letting your new hire free and let the magic happen with a performance manager, right? So how can we not drop the ball after the new employee is on board, while at the same time not take the accountability from the performance manager? And we've done three things. One is that TA is talent acquisition, checks in with a new joiner 1 month after the joining date, which means if there's anything that is not set up at the time, expectations are not managed, we can already push that trajectory up again if something is missing. Has been proven quite valuable in the past. Then we have 2, 4, and 6 month peer feedback that is automatically sent to both the new joiner as well as the performance manager to understand, okay, so how is that person actually assimilating in the team? And 3, because as you noticed, what I shared is that the confirmations were late, right? 2 months, 3 months, actually people were not confirmed. We're doing a check-in with the people and engagement team after month 5 to ensure that everything is on track. That so once the day hits of the probation confirmation, people are basically getting confirmed, right? So what's the contemporary impact? And this is a survey we sent out to them after the first month. You can see the highlighted parts here. It will go again a bit fast, but we talk about values, we talk about goals and the business, we talk about higher reporting manager preparation, we talk about the process of joining, as well as being enabled to perform the job, which is this is all about, right? When do I feel ready to perform the job? And we can see here, while in 2018 and 19, people were admittedly not so happy about that. We can see that gradually over time, we basically improved this to a satisfactory rate with two things. One, again, two buckets are there to fill: assimilation into organization, people and culture, the roles that you hold, right? The expectations to you, job description, KPI, as well as the tools and system we use. While at the same time, creating this engagement and excitement to be proud to be part of SoFam, right? A sense of belonging. But the long-term impact, and that's the cliffhanger today. And if you want to see me again, that's something for you to decide. What's the concrete effects of after that probation happens, right? On the annual individual performance, on the ultimate company's performance, right? That's something that we're still measuring because of the current time lag, of course, since we're implementing these initiatives. But in the meantime, and this is basically opening to the floor, please ask questions as well, of course. Yet, in your organization, what's your needle mover to ensuring that the new employees are saying, I'm at my peak performance? And how do you set your trajectory towards that?
Thank you, Tim. We're managing right towards the end of time here. So let me just pick on one or two key individuals, and then let's see. Felix, would you mind starting? I know you changed jobs also during COVID times. Felix joining us from Adidas.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for being a little bit late. So I maybe not hear the presentation in the beginning, but pretty interesting, Tim. Thanks for sharing. Really valuable stuff. I really like that. For me, one of my main questions was this adaptation part because of COVID, right? Companies had to adapt to a virtual environment. Now we're kind of returning into something that is a new normal, whatever we're going to call that. But one of the things that I'm struggling right now is because I'm redesigning the onboarding experience within Adidas. We're trying to. Should we keep an idea, let's say, a positive idea that things are actually getting better, this will be the new reality, or prepare for any other disaster that could happen, or again, COVID 3.0, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I guess that's my general question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, aside from this on day one onboarding experience, most of these processes will hold up, even though you're not in the office and seeing yourself face to face. What's most importantly for us is actually that the hiring managers and performance managers know what's happening throughout this entire time, right? So when the day one hits, that it's not like, oh, so what should I do now with my new joiner, right? But it's actually this prepared notion of, okay, I know that the person comes in, and today I understand that this person will actually help me to take part of my role. So I think it's very much about, as a recommendation, to think about what type of format can you build during the onboarding that can sustain both virtual as well as basically physical, right? Because aside from actually doing the SOCA Plus like tour to the office, everything can be done virtually, right? The handover as well. Everything is scheduled already by our HRMS, so basically everyone knows that this person will be coming, right? So I think that's one of the most important things that, you know, you will always remember the first thing and the last thing usually. That's somehow our brains are primed towards that, right? And very much is that what we experience, that people actually have a better perception of the first week if we do that.
Yep.
Thank you, Tim. We're out of time, but to be continued. Thank you very much for sharing so openly from the behind the scenes, even though you're joining in from nighttime around the world in Kuala Lumpur. I'm pretty sure that there's quite a lot of parallels that we can take away. I took a lot of notes. Look forward to writing this up and then following your journey as it progresses. Sounds like it's been an interesting learning experience for you so far down there. So let's stay in touch.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for everyone for joining. Be very welcome
Thank you, Tim.
Connect with Janus and us, and we take it from there.
Thank you.